scored away the top surface to reveal the white underneath. And amazing depictions of birds, insects, and animals were created in this way. And some of them were only discovered in terms of what they were when we rediscovered, and I emphasize the rediscovered our fly in this century. Because some of these things can only be seen from 1,000 feet, apparently. So there's a bird, and here's a spider. Again, the Nazca lines. How did they do that, these primitive people all over the world? Because they were not primitive. In the sense that there was a group within ancient society that had amazingly advanced knowledge. And that's the knowledge that's been hoarded and passed over to the few into the modern world that is still used to control us and always has been used to control us. And it's amazing. People talk about prophecy. Well, here's a confirmation that prophecy is absolutely fact and not some myth. On an ancient hillside, or not an ancient hillside, but a hillside with an ancient depiction of something on it, in Devon, in England, here's an incredible prophecy of, thousands of years later, the arrival on Earth of Bill Clinton. Bill comes into this in many ways. Sorry, my eyes are watering. It's all right. Cameraman's looking a bit pale as well. But Bill Clinton, again, President of the United States, as we'll see, all this stuff about, Monica Lewinsky and all that stuff is absolutely obscuring what Bill Clinton's really involved in and what he's really connected to. Because, again, we're watching, day after day, a smokescreen and an illusion behind which the truth is. So, in the ancient world, there were people with fantastic knowledge. Where did that knowledge come from? I put this picture up just to emphasize the nonsense of how the idea that extraterrestrial life doesn't exist, how ridiculous it is. There are billions of stars in this universe. It's apparently estimated, I was reading, 1 billion in this galaxy. How many galaxies in the universe? That's just the physical universe. What about all the other parallel universes? What we call creation is alive with life. And yet it's become a situation where you're ridiculed if you talk about extraterrestrial life over the years. You get people saying, hey, he thinks there's other life in the universe more intelligent than me, And you think, darling, I've seen a cup of coffee more intelligent than you. But the point being that to say that in this amazing mass of life in this galaxy alone, that life as we know it has only evolved on this one tiny little planet in this one solar system, that's credible. Oh, yeah, scientists say that. And yet to say there must be life elsewhere on the law of averages alone is to be, he's a bit strange, he believes in extraterrestrials. But when you look dispassionately at the evidence, and that's the point, if you come into this stuff with a belief to defend, might as well go and watch The Price is Right, because the belief will defend itself. If we let the information lead us rather than the preconceived idea, it takes us into some very interesting areas. First of all, when you look at ancient texts and traditions all over the world, literally all over the world, you find very clear descriptions of an advanced race or races that we would call extraterrestrial, not of this planet, that came to this planet and brought this advanced knowledge a long, long time ago. Some of the most famous examples of this are what have become known as the Sumerian texts or tablets. They were found in what we now call Iraq in the last century, about 1850. There's thousands of them. And they've been translated by a number of people, most famously a guy called Zecharia Sitchin. People think he's the only one that's done it because of the publicity and stuff that he's got in his books, but many other people have done it, and actually have come to a slightly different interpretation than him. But the common theme of all of them is this, that a group which the Sumerian tablets, which were buried around 2000 BC, something like that, that they talk about this group they call the Anunnaki in Sumerian, those who from heaven to earth came, which is the basic translation, but those who came from the high place and down to the earth overall is the feel of it. The Anunnaki. And when it talks about these Anunnaki and the tablets and stuff, here's an example of just one of the so-called cylinder seals that were found among them, depicting various things. There are some remarkable points and areas of text and evidence that you can see. First of all, there is remarkable knowledge in these texts of planetary, solar system, universal, astronomical knowledge that has only been confirmed in this century, and sometimes even more recently. In the text, for instance, they describe what Uranus and Neptune look like in a way that's only been confirmed in literally the last few years. They depict the solar system with planets that have only been found in the last century and the 20th century. How did they do that? What they say is the knowledge was brought by this Anunnaki. But it's more than that, because it talks in some detail about how this Anunnaki interbred with humanity, creating a hybrid race. And you find this theme all over the world. You find it in Genesis, in the Bible, which is a rewrite, when you do the research, of the Sumerian stories. So we get the theme of the sons of God, who interbred with the daughters of men. But when you take that back to the Hebrew, just one step, you find that phrase, sons of God interbred with the daughters of men, actually says sons of the gods interbred with the daughters of men. And every time in the Old Testament you see the word God, it's translated from a word meaning gods. And it's clear to me that we have been misled and we've misunderstood the difference between the gods, symbolically extraterrestrials in the ancient world, and God, which is all consciousness, all energy, everything that exists. So these Sumerian tablets very much confirm this ancient race. Now, again, when you look at other cultures, you find the same stories. In the ancient Hindu cultures, the Vedas, their ancient holy books, you find descriptions of the gods flying in flying machines, which we would call aeroplanes or UFOs or flying saucers, whatever. And when you take the common theme around the world, it's very clear that in the ancient world was a race or races of very, very high technological knowledge. And this was the knowledge that built the pyramids. This was the knowledge that built all those ancient structures which conventional history and archaeology simply cannot explain. Now, this area here of what we call the asteroid belt would seem to be very, very significant. If you take Zecharia Sitchin's translation of the Sumerian tablets, the detail of which I have a problem with, I must say, here and there, they talk about, according to his translation, that a planet called Nibiru, the planet of the crossing in his translation of the Sumerian, came into this solar system a vast, vast amount of time ago. And one of its moons collided with a planet that was between Jupiter and Mars, and that created the asteroid belt, which just happens to be between Jupiter and Mars. That's one interpretation of what happened, but there are others, and I've come across a scientist, a friend in America, who's been researching all this for 30 years, and he is convinced from a large amount of different evidence that actually something different happened, not least because at a major corporation he used to work for, they did a study, the physicists at that corporation, into what must have happened to the solar system, because when you look at the planets and how they spin and how fast they spin and all this stuff, it's very clear that some major, major disruption has happened in this solar system. It's affected not just the Earth, but also the other planets. It's a major cataclysm. And they came to the conclusion, which basically supports the theme of a guy called Immanuel Velikovsky in the 50s, who was ridiculed for saying that what we now call Venus went through this solar system, devastated Mars, and almost destroyed the Earth. But these physicists are actually supporting the basis of that. What they believe as a result of their research is that the planet we now call Jupiter came into this solar system not that long ago, remarkably, 7,000 years ago maybe, something like that. 4,800 BC was the date that I was given for the window of time that it happened. And it collided with a planet that was in that area, and devastation unfolded, and the asteroid belt was the result. They also suggested that a great chunk of Jupiter, which is a colossal planet, of course, broke off and careered through this solar system and devastated Mars. Interestingly, the probes to Mars have suggested that the landscape of Mars is no more than 10,000 years old. So something certainly happened there that devastated it. And came close enough to the Earth and was caught in the Earth's field for a while, did a couple of orbits, and that orbit, when you look at the scientific suggestion of what that would have caused, starts to confirm some incredible legends, traditions, and oral and written evidence from the ancient world all over the planet that there came what the Bible calls the Great Flood. One of the things that this would have done, this pass by what we now call Venus, is to have created a 10,000-foot tidal wave. Interestingly, in the pre-flood world, since then, agriculture as we know it began at heights above 10,000 feet. Quite obvious why that would have happened in the scenario we're talking about. It is also suggested, and my other research, and in the book The Biggest Secret, it's detailed and documented in great detail, is that there was a Martian race, which was the white race, which actually came to the Earth and was interacting with the Earth, but as a result of the devastation and destruction of Mars, actually came here because it needed to survive. And this white Aryan Martian race based itself, and those that were here at the time of the cataclysm survived as a result of going into the high places in the Near East, what we now call Turkey, Caucasus Mountains, Iran, and that sort of area. And the amazing culture that appeared there, and I'll come to that in a second, was the result of this knowledge. This is another map of Europe and North America. Again, I'm talking about a cataclysm here, maybe about 4,800 BC, but there have been many of them. When you look at the geological and biological records, it's very clear this planet has had many cataclysms. Just talking about one. Earlier, around 13,000 years ago, there was clearly another. And that area, which they call Appalachia, which is now sea, was actually land in that window of 13,000 years ago. What we call the Alps, what we call the Himalayas and the Andes, those fantastic mountain ranges only reached anything like their present height around 13,000 years ago. So the Earth, while we've lived through quite a stable period in known human history, actually changes its face from time to time, quite obviously because of various events. Atlantis was supposed to have been one of the ancient cultures back in the ancient world which had this advanced knowledge and was destroyed by cataclysm. And again, this is a theme all over the world when you look at the ancient texts and oral traditions of this land of high technology, of high knowledge that was destroyed by cataclysm. And so once this cataclysm and cataclysms had unfolded over this period of time, 13,000 down to 7,000 years ago, that kind of window, a number of them, that great ancient civilization of knowledge, what the ancients called the Golden Age, was wiped from the face of the earth, and we started again. But we started again with different levels of knowledge. Among the survivors of these upheavals were the mass of the people who survived, or the representatives of them, who were still in ignorance, and then again there were the few who had the knowledge. So it all started again. Same structure, and we've moved into the modern world where we're now at a point where we were a long, long time ago before these cataclysms wiped that civilization from the face of the earth. So what we're looking at here is the area that they concentrated on, where the white race actually came out of, interestingly. When they're talking about the Martian race being a white race and actually focusing in that area of the world, the Caucasus Mountains, southern Russia, that area, Caucasus Mountains, down into what we now call Turkey and those areas around there, Iran, that's where the white race came from. The actually original name of Iran translates as land of the Aryans. When you look at the Hindu culture in the Indus Valley, which was one of these cultures, again, that spontaneously emerged with advanced knowledge, even conventional history accepts that that culture, the Vedas and the structure of the Hindu religion, etc., was taken into the Indus Valley by an Aryan white race from the Caucasus Mountains. And when the floodwaters started to recede, down from the high places, which could be the translation of Anunnaki, those who came from the high place, came down into the Indus Valley, into the plains and valleys of Sumer, and they created the Sumerian culture, which is accepted again by conventional history, didn't start at this level and gradually evolve. It started at a very high level of advancement and then gradually fell away. Same with Egypt. It started at a very high level of advancement and then gradually fell away. Babylon, another one. And again, there are different uses of knowledge. And Babylon appears to have been a center for those who were in a state of being that wanted to use this knowledge to control, because Babylon was where so much of the manipulation and control of today actually came out of. So, in short, we have an extraterrestrial race in that area interbreeding with humanity, creating hybrid bloodlines. Now, in The Biggest Secret, I go into this in much more detail, but it seems to me that along with this white Martian race was what UFO researchers have called a reptilian race. And the detail of that is documented there. And it's this reptilian race that also interbred with humanity, and I think the reptilian race were the Anunnaki. When the first interbreeding took place, the hybrids were half human, half Anunnaki, I think reptilian. And they interbred with this Martian race, this white race that became the race that took over the world, in effect. When a second interbreeding took place, it wasn't between the Anunnaki, reptilian race, and the humans, it was between the Anunnaki and their hybrid bloodstreams. So now we're going 75% Anunnaki, reptilian, 25% human. These bloodlines, what I will call the pure bloodlines, the pure hybrids, these are the ones, when you trace into the modern world, that turned up as the pharaohs, as the ancient kings of Iran, the so-called serpent kings, that became the aristocracy of Europe, that became the royal families of Europe, and through the Great British Empire became the presidents, business leaders, bankers of the United States. The reason that these families of the Eastern establishment of the United States that produce the people that run America and the European aristocracy and royal families, the reason throughout history that they have obsessively interbred with each other and not outside is because they're trying to hold this genetic structure. This is a picture I took of a partial eclipse of the sun on a pyramid at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan, a Maya pyramid. And understanding the two levels of knowledge of the sun from the ancient world to today is to understand much about this manipulation and what's been happening in the world. On one level, the masses obviously focused on the sun because of its heat and warmth and its effect on their lives and their crops and all that stuff. But the few at the top of these pyramids of control, the advanced race, or races, if you like, they understood the much bigger nature of the sun. The fact that it is not just a source of heat and light, it is a fantastic generator of magnetic electrical energy which is affecting life on Earth second by second by second by second. And so, in summary, what you had here was a white Martian race which its hierarchy had this knowledge, and this Anunnaki reptilian race, and you'd have to see The Biggest Secret for the enormous documentation of that being true. And they also had this knowledge. And below both, you had the mass of the people who didn't have this knowledge of the sun and much else. And a tussle took place between these two races, and eventually the reptilian race, through their bloodlines, took control and now control the world. So let's have a look at the nature of this knowledge of the sun. What you're going to see now are sunspots, great arcs of fantastic energy that are emitted from the sun in cycles. Sometimes they're very powerful, sometimes they're less powerful. And the sun is 99% of the mass of the solar system. When it changes, everything changes. And a great example of what I'm talking about and how it affects us and how the ancients knew about this is a guy called Maurice Cottrell. Earlier on in his life, he did a lot of research into sunspot activity, solar flare activity, these projections of energy from the sun, and he found that they could be put into various cycles. Small cycles, medium cycles, great cycles over thousands of years. Later on in his life, he came across the Maya information left in Central America, the Yucatan, by the Maya people who picked it up from previous people, and again you go back eventually to this extraterrestrial race, or races, emphasis on the races, and they have put together a symbolic and mathematical structure that talks about cycles of human evolution, small cycles, medium cycles, great cycles. And Cottrell found, to his surprise, that these Maya cycles of human evolution corresponded, even over thousands of years, in remarkable synchronicity with his cycles of sunspot activity, projections of energy from the sun. He also looked at the various historical cycles and found that the rise and the fall of great civilizations like the Roman Empire corresponded to these cycles of sun energy. So, when the sun changes, we change. We are encouraged at some points to be open to more aggression or more this or more that. Now, if you know that, and you know that at certain times the mass consciousness is more likely to react in a certain way, then you know, as you're manipulating the world, when to have your wars, when to have your economic collapses. And this is why, as many researchers, not just myself, have established, that these events tend to happen in key years relating to sunspot and sun energy cycles. Therefore, in the ancient world, there was the knowledge of the sun in its true importance, in its true effect, and then there was the mass of the people who just looked at it in a totally different way. And this is why in the cultures of the ancient world you found, again, here a chair from Egypt, a throne from Egypt, a Akhenaten chair, the pharaoh, sun. Gold, the solar color, the solar metal. This is why the obsession was with gold. Also, lions, you find tremendous symbolism of the lion. The lion with its long mane symbolized the sun, which is why it was always there. Here again, in Sri Lanka, gold and the sun. Here in Rome, the two lions, the sun, and the disc, the sun. Again, understanding this. Now, here, much more recently, this is the sun chair of George Washington, first president of the United States. And the reason that you find the symbols of the ancient world used by this high advanced level of knowledge in the more modern world, right to the present day, among the secret societies and among the countries in terms of flags and symbols, etc., is because the same knowledge stream is used today and the same manipulation is used today as always was. Now, this is a symbol that explains so much about religion and many of the symbols you see in the modern world. Because of the focus on the sun in its various levels of importance and understanding, this symbol was devised in the ancient world to symbolize the passage of the sun through the year. They did the circle with the zodiac, zodiac coming from a Greek word meaning animal circle appropriately. They broke the circle into 4, the seasons, with the cross, and they put the sun on the cross. I've heard that somewhere before. So what they did is to focus their symbolism on this journey of the sun. This is why, when you look pre-Christian, pre-Jesus, you find an endless stream of deities in the ancient world who were given birthdays of December the 25th. Why is that? Because around December 21st, 22nd, you have the lowest point in the sun cycle in the year, the northern hemisphere anyway, which is the winter solstice. And at that point, the ancients said the sun had symbolically died. 3 days later, the sun had demonstrably started its journey back to its peak in the summer. And at that point, December the 25th, they said the sun was born or born again. And because Christianity was created in the form we know it by a sun-worshipping Roman emperor called Constantine the Great, that's why Jesus was given the birthday of December the 25th, symbolic of the sun, which is what Jesus is to a large extent. The evidence that he existed is like almost non-existent, if not non-existent in total. So by Easter, the sun was entering the sign of the ram or the lamb. And so they had ceremonies in which they sacrificed lambs in the pre-Christian world because they believed that by sacrificing the lamb to the gods, they would have good luck and their sins would be forgiven and all that stuff. Now this is where the symbolism of Jesus and so many mirrors of Jesus in the pre-Christian world, that's why we constantly get this recurring story of the lamb who died so our sins could be forgiven. Now, what the ancients also did is they symbolized the sun as a baby at the December the 25th time, as a kind of a youth at Easter, and as a strapping, strong, immensely strong man in the height of the summer, and losing his power in the fall, autumn, and then being an old man back towards the winter solstice. And they symbolized the sun as a person with long, golden hair, just like the mane of the lion. And so this is where the Old Testament story of Samson comes from. Samson. And what happened was they had him with long hair, big strapping man, the sun at the peak of the summer. And then what happened in the story, he started to lose his strength. And what happened to make him do that? He had his hair cut. The rays of the sun were getting less and less powerful as he entered the house of Delilah, Virgo the Virgin, which is the astrological sign as you're entering into the fall. And so often, and again in The Biggest Secret, this is documented constantly, this is why you get constant stories which we are asked in the masses to take literally, therefore a prison religion emerges, when in fact they're symbolic, and often symbolic of the sun. So, this is what this is, the Celtic cross. It's the circle and the cross, the symbol I've just had on the screen. This is NATO. NATO is a wholly owned subsidiary of this brotherhood, this group of bloodlines, the reptile-human bloodlines, the hybrids that run the planet. Again, this is the CIA symbol. Again, there's the cross with the sun on the cross. And this sun symbolism is something that you can read this brotherhood by. I came across this shot, or this symbol, in the City of London. Now, we'll get to this. The City of London is the operational epicenter of this global web of manipulation. And this is across the road from St. Paul's Cathedral. And again, you see the same symbolism, and on the center you've got the black sun. Now, the black sun symbolizes two things. It symbolizes the negative use of solar energy, and it also symbolizes something that's becoming more and more obvious and people are becoming more aware of, and that's that it's not just the planets that go around the sun in the solar system. This solar system is also traveling around a central point, and that central point is known symbolically as the black sun, kind of a galactic center, and it takes 26,000 years for the solar system to go round that sun, and we are now in the process of completing one of those 26,000 year cycles, which is why the world is changing, and is going to change dramatically in the next 15 years to 2012. So again, this symbol keeps coming up in the modern world as well as the ancient one. Now, Even in the design of cities, which this brotherhood has in the modern world controlled, you see exactly the same symbol. What you're looking at here is